Okay. The next part is student grouping. It says, how will you group students for instruction? This is an answer we've all been talking about today already. What's the answer? Small groups based on reading levels. So you'll write that. Now when we do our other lesson plans in the future, that might not be the answer. So I've seen people that enter this into their computer and save it, and they never change that. That changes our grouping. So when you get to a new lesson plan, think about the grouping. It'll change for each lesson. For guided reading, though, this will be small group. Then it says, why have you chosen this grouping? Based on what criteria? Well, there was a whole PowerPoint slide on why we need to do small group instruction. What were some of those things it said? Because you can meet the needs of a diverse group of kids, and because you can watch the kids what? Read. Problem solve and read. So be thinking about, so you might write look in PowerPoint for reasons that we would want to teach small group reading. So use your resources like your textbook and things like that for when you're trying to explain or justify yourself. Really do some looking at your materials. That can help you. And I will put on your paper probably be more specific and take off points if you just give me like a one-word answer. It needs to be a real reason. Okay, now the next one says, what teaching methods will you use for this lesson? I kind of front-loaded a little bit today, and I talked about some things that you can do that are called methods. We talked about think, pair, share. We talked about a word wall. We've talked about playing like memory. I'm so sorry. Can anyone think of another method that we've talked about? Context clues. And so a method, though, if we're going to teach kids about context clues, we need to think of a way we can model using context clues. One of the methods that she used in the video was she had them do a picture walk. And that picture walk was very helpful because they got to predict what was going to happen. And they got familiar with some of those words that were going to be in the story, like squid and snail and sandpiper. Those were some words that she told them about ahead of time. So a book introduction is a teaching method that's helpful. Now this should be the longest section of yours. So write out might make a little note on the outside of the column that this should be pretty long answer because it's going to include everything that you plan to do as a teacher. So that would include the very beginning. You might start out with, it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to teach punctuation, you might start out by showing an example of what it sounds like when you use incorrect punctuation and show what it sounds like when you do it wrong. And then you can show them what it looks like when you do it right. That would be a good activity to introduce the idea. And then you would introduce the book, do a picture walk. You're going to write those things down. And then who's going to read the book? The students are going to read the books. And what will you be doing while they're reading the books? Observing and scaffolding. So that's one of the methods you'll be using, observing or scaffolding while they read and while they problem solve. And then there should be one last thing you do at the end of the book. Before evaluation, you'll want to evaluate and assess the learning, but you'll need to ask some comprehension questions. So that's going to be like the last thing you do in your methods, is somehow you might have them retell the story. Have you seen those little fun things you can throw, and the question that lands on the top might be name a character, and then you've tossed the cube to someone else and it lands on what was the problem in the story. There are some fun materials out there if you have access to. You can use one of those materials if you want to, but somehow discuss the book to make sure that the kids understand that reading is for meaning and that we want to understand what happened. Okay, so that's how you're going to answer page. And then, but now at the bottom of page 3 it says, why have you chosen this method or these methods? You've got to tell me why you chose them. And you're going to be thinking, well, because you said to. But I want you to tell me, what does research tell us that why should we do a picture walk? Well, because we can introduce the kids to words they don't know, and they'll have a higher success rate, right? Or I'm afraid that some kids might not know what this word is, and some others might, so I'm going to try to get them in an even playing field when they go into this book. Just use your common sense and things we've learned in class for why you would do those methods.